He was born on June 6, 1992, in Mogadishu. He grew up in a country that has seen more hardship than most places on earth can imagine. He chose football not as a player, but as an official, the person whose authority on the pitch is the very foundation every match rests on. He worked his way up through local football in Somalia, building a reputation one game at a time in a country where building anything takes extraordinary will. He earned a spot on the FIFA international list in 2018. In January 2024, he made history as the first Somali referee ever to officiate at an Africa Cup of Nations. In the 2025-26 season, he refereed the second leg of the CAF Champions League final, the first Somali ever to lead a continental final. He was selected to officiate at the Under-20 World Cup in Chile, including the third-place playoff. In 2025, he was named CAF Men's Referee of the Year, the best official on an entire continent. And in early 2026, he was selected by FIFA referee chief Pierluigi Collina as one of 52 officials for the 2026 World Cup, the first Somali in history to receive that call. His name is Omar Artan. He is 33 years old, and on June 6, 2026, his birthday, he arrived at Miami International Airport carrying a valid visa, his FIFA accreditation, and every document that a lifetime of work had earned him the right to carry. What happened next is one of the defining stories of the entire 2026 World Cup. Not because of what happened on the field, but because of what happened in an airport corridor, in a holding cell, and in the offices of politicians who chose to speak when the institution running the tournament would not. Artan was stopped at the gate. He was taken to a secondary inspection room. He was questioned for 11 hours. The questions focused heavily on Al-Shabaab, the militant organization that operates in parts of Somalia, and that has absolutely no connection to Omar Artan, his career, his travel history, or his presence at a football tournament. According to reporting from Gazzetta dello Sport and multiple other outlets, the core of the problem appears to have been a name match. Artan shares a name with a figure associated with the militant group, and that was apparently enough to trigger the process that followed. He was placed in a holding cell. He was then put on a Turkish Airlines flight to Istanbul. He did not get on a connecting flight to Miami. He flew home to Mogadishu. He arrived without having refereed a single match at the World Cup. He arrived with everything he had built still intact and a dignity that no airport corridor could strip from him. But he arrived without what he had earned. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection confirmed to reporters that Artan was, quote, determined to be inadmissible due to vetting concerns. No further explanation was provided. A senior administration official told CBS News that the denial was based on what was described as derogatory information, including claimed association with suspected terrorist group members. No specifics were made public. No formal process was offered. No appeal was available. The decision was final, and it was delivered at a border crossing with no recourse and no transparency. Somalia is one of 39 countries affected by travel restrictions implemented by the Trump administration, which introduced an expanded travel ban in 2025 as part of a broader immigration enforcement push. The administration's stated rationale was to ensure that individuals granted visas do not pose a threat to national security or public safety. For 19 of the 39 affected nations, the State Department halted all visa issuances entirely. Somalia is on that list. The fact that Artan had obtained a valid visa, reportedly a diplomatic passport issued by Somalia's embassy in Nairobi after earlier visa difficulties, did not protect him when he landed in Florida. The visa got him on the plane. It did not get him through the door. This matters politically in a way that goes well beyond football. The 2026 World Cup was awarded to a joint bid from the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It was, by design, a statement tournament, the largest World Cup in history, hosted across 3 nations, with 64 teams competing across 16 venues on 2 continents. The tournament was explicitly framed as a celebration of football's global reach, its universality, its ability to bring the world together under one sporting roof. And then, before a single match was played, the country hosting the majority of the tournament, the country that lobbied hardest to win the bid, and that controls the officiating infrastructure at the tournament's operational center in Miami, turned away one of the 52 referees the sport's own governing body had selected from a global pool. The optics were not complicated. They were devastating. FIFA's response, when it came, was precise in its institutional language and deeply inadequate in its practical effect. The governing body confirmed that Artan would be unable to train and officiate at the tournament following his denial of entry into the United States. It confirmed it is not involved in host country immigration processes, including visa adjudications. It confirmed a host government ultimately determines who receives a visa and who is admitted. It confirmed his status would not be changed at present. Those four confirmations, taken together, constitute a governing body formally washing its hands of responsibility for the situation. Each sentence is technically accurate. Together, they amount to a statement that FIFA selected a man, put him on a plane, and then had nothing to say when the country it chose to host its tournament sent him home. There was, to be fair, one genuinely meaningful action buried in FIFA's response. The governing body confirmed that Artan would receive his full tournament fee, every payment, every bonus, the same compensation as every other World Cup official, despite officiating 0 matches. That decision matters. It is a formal, financial acknowledgement that what happened was wrong, even if the surrounding language refuses to say so directly. It is the governing body's way of acknowledging fault without naming it. It is the closest thing to accountability that FIFA produced in this episode. What it is not is a response to the structural question the episode raised. And that question is one that FIFA built for itself. All 52 referees and 88 assistant referees at the 2026 World Cup are part of what the governing body calls Team 1, a single centralized officiating group managed from a training hub in Miami. Officials are not assigned separately by country. They are not deployed independently to Canadian matches or Mexican matches. The system requires every official to be physically present at the Miami hub, to participate in the preparation program, the sessions, and the security protocols before being assigned to any match anywhere in the tournament. Because Artan was denied entry to the United States, he could not access the Miami hub. Because he could not access the hub, he could not be part of Team 1. And because he could not be part of Team 1, he could not referee anywhere, not in Kansas City, not in Los Angeles, and not in Vancouver or Toronto. That last point matters enormously, because what happened next showed that there were people who wanted to make something different happen, and that the system FIFA built made it structurally impossible for them to succeed. The Canadian response to the Omar Artan story is, in the full context of this tournament, one of the most morally significant chapters in the entire narrative of 2026. David Eby is the Premier of British Columbia. He is the political leader of the province whose city of Vancouver is hosting 7 World Cup matches, including knockout round fixtures. BC Place Stadium in Vancouver is one of the 13 Canadian venues in this tournament. Eby oversees the hosting operation in his province. He went on social media and wrote words that have since been read by millions of people around the world. He wrote that Mr. Artan would be welcomed and celebrated in British Columbia for what he has overcome and where he is today. And then he wrote 4 words that cut through every institutional statement and diplomatic deflection that had come before them. Let's have him referee in Vancouver, not a press release, not a statement of concern with appropriate diplomatic hedging, a direct public invitation from a political leader with the institutional authority to make it meaningful. Olivia Chow is the mayor of Toronto. Her city is hosting 6 World Cup matches, including Canada's opening fixture. She released a full formal statement. She said that denying entry to Omar Artan, who had earned his place on the world stage through hard work and perseverance, was not right. She said Toronto believes in fairness, inclusion, and giving talent the opportunity to shine. She said he would be welcome to referee in her city. And then she went a step further. She committed to writing a formal letter to FIFA as mayor of a host city, requesting that a specific official be assigned to matches in her jurisdiction. That is not a social media post. That is an official act of government, however symbolic it may have proved to be in practice. Marit Stiles, Ontario's opposition leader, echoed both of them. She posted that Artan had earned his place on the world stage, and that, with matches coming to Toronto, he should be welcome to referee at BMO Field. 3 Canadian leaders, 3 separate statements, all published within hours of each other, all saying the same thing to the same institution. You had the right man, you couldn't protect him, we will. It is worth sitting with what that contrast represents. The United States government, under President Trump's immigration enforcement framework, turned away a referee selected by the sport's own global governing body. Canada, the co-host, opened its arms and said, "Come here, we want you." The contrast was not subtle, and it was not accidental. Canadian officials understood exactly what the moment required, and they delivered it cleanly. The Canadian offer, however genuine, ran into the structural wall that FIFA's own organizational decisions had built. Because the training hub was in Miami, and because Team 1's integrity required physical presence in Miami, there was no procedural path by which Artan could have been transferred to Vancouver or Toronto and assigned matches from there. The offer was real, the welcome was real, the intent was real. But the framework that FIFA built for a tri-hosted tournament had made that framework entirely dependent on one of the 3 host countries. The one that had just turned away one of its own selected officials. The Canadian door was open. FIFA's operational architecture had locked it from the inside. The response from UEFA arrived quickly and carried a different weight entirely. Within hours of Artan landing in Mogadishu, the governing body of European football announced his appointment to the 2026 UEFA Super Cup final between Paris Saint-Germain and Aston Villa in Salzburg on August 12th. He will become the first African referee ever to lead a major UEFA final. UEFA President Alexander Ceferin said directly that football is made to connect people. The CAF president personally thanked Ceferin by name in public for giving Artan the stage the World Cup had denied him. The institutional response from European football was immediate, specific, and carried with it the weight of genuine conviction. Aston Villa, who qualified for the Super Cup as UEFA Europa League winners, will face Paris Saint-Germain, the reigning Champions League holders. The stage UEFA handed Artan is not a consolation prize, it is a continental final. It is history of a different kind, made on a different continent, under the banner of a confederation that moved fast when its instincts told it to. When Artan landed in Mogadishu, thousands of people filled a stadium, not for a match, but for him. The president of Somalia called him personally. His country draped him in their flag and received him as a national hero. And in the middle of all of it, Artan spoke with a composure that said more than any official statement. He said that what had happened, and that it was fate. And he said quietly, with the measured certainty of someone who has already decided what comes next, that God willing, he would be at the next one. Those words arrived in the same news cycle as FIFA President Gianni Infantino's hot dog joke. Infantino, in a media appearance earlier in the tournament window, had been asked about $2 million resale tickets for the World Cup final. He responded by saying that if someone actually paid $2 million for a ticket, he would personally bring them a hot dog and a Coke to make sure they had a great experience. The joke made headlines. When reporters pressed FIFA leadership on the Artan situation and the broader questions it raised about the institution's relationship with the U.S. government hosting the tournament, the response that filtered back was, in essence, to chill and relax. Both statements, Artan's quiet promise to return and the governing body's instruction to relax, were heard. Both will be remembered. The contrast between them is the contrast between the institution that runs this sport and the man that institution failed. There is a broader political dimension to the Artan story that deserves to be named clearly because it doesn't go away when the tournament ends. The Trump administration's travel restrictions, the policy framework that made Artan's detention possible, were in place before a single World Cup match was scheduled, and they remain in place now. Somalia is not alone on the list. Iran, Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Haiti are among the 39 countries affected by the expanded restrictions. 4 of those countries sent national teams to this World Cup. Their players were cleared. Their fans were not always as fortunate. Artan's case was the most visible, but NPR and other outlets reported ahead of the tournament that FIFA and U.S. immigration authorities had been quietly working through a long list of accreditation cases in which World Cup participants faced access difficulties because of the restrictions. The governing body negotiated, on a case-by-case basis, what exemptions it could. It did not negotiate one that covered its own selected officials effectively enough to prevent what happened on June 6th. The deeper question, the one that has no clean answer but that this episode forces onto the table, is what it means for football to award its most important tournaments to countries whose governments reserve the right to exclude participants based on nationality. FIFA has awarded the 2030 World Cup to a joint bid from Morocco, Portugal, and Spain, with additional matches in Argentina, Uruguay, and Chile. It has awarded 2034 to Saudi Arabia. Both of those tournaments will happen under governing frameworks that include their own access and exclusion dynamics. The Artan case is not the first time that a World Cup host government's policies have collided with football's stated universality. It will not be the last. What varies is how visible the collision is, and whether the governing body responds to the visibility with accountability or deflection. In 2026, the answer was deflection, a financial settlement, and an instruction to relax. The political fallout extended well beyond football circles. Within days of Artan's deportation, members of the United States Congress raised the case in public statements, with several Democratic representatives calling on the Department of Homeland Security to explain the basis for the denial and whether corrective procedures were being reviewed. Republican leadership declined to comment. The White House did not respond to requests for clarification beyond what CBP had already stated. The administration's immigration enforcement apparatus treated the episode as a routine application of its vetting framework. No exception was made. No expedited review process was offered. The case was closed before the tournament even opened. International reaction moved faster. Human rights organizations cited the episode as a concrete example of how broad travel ban frameworks, designed with national security language, produce specific human costs for individuals who have no connection whatsoever to the concerns those frameworks were designed to address. Artan himself made no political statement. He made no accusation. He stated facts, expressed grace, and looked forward. The political commentary was left to everyone else, and there was no shortage of it. What gave the episode particular resonance in the broader conversation about FIFA and its governance was the timing. The 2026 World Cup was supposed to be a statement moment for the institution. The tournament that proved FIFA had moved past the corruption era, that defined the 2015 scandals, the Swiss raids, the bribery convictions, the stench of Qatar. The governing body had spent years building a narrative of reform. And then, on the very first weekend of its most ambitious tournament, the story dominating global football media was not the opening matches, not the goals, not the new 64-team format that FIFA had championed as the future of the sport. The story was a referee from Somalia, sitting in a holding cell at Miami International Airport, questioned about a terrorist group he has never had any connection to, on his birthday, carrying credentials that his own governing body had issued and then proved unable to defend. The symbolism was not lost on anyone who covers this sport professionally. FIFA has spent enormous institutional energy presenting itself as the guardian of football's universal values. One world, one game, one governing body, for all of humanity's love of football, regardless of nationality, religion, or background. The 2026 tournament was explicitly marketed on those terms. And the first significant story the tournament produced was a demonstration that those values, however sincerely invoked in press releases, do not override the immigration decisions of a host government whose policies the governing body chose not to challenge directly, either before the tournament or during it. What remains genuinely uncertain is what this episode changes about how FIFA manages its officiating infrastructure at future tournaments. Whether the centralization of the training hub in one host country at a tri-hosted World Cup will be reviewed. Whether the system will be built differently for 2030 and 2034 in ways that don't make the participation of every official contingent on the immigration decisions of a single government. These are questions the governing body will face. Whether it chooses to answer them before the next incident or only after is itself a statement about what kind of institution it is. For now, the scoreboard reads like this. The United States denied Artan entry. FIFA said it was not involved in immigration decisions. UEFA gave him the Super Cup final. Canada invited him to Vancouver. The CAF president thanked Europe by name. and thousands of people in Mogadishu filled a stadium to welcome him home. That is the full sequence of institutional responses to what happened at Miami Airport on June 6, 2026. 4 different entities, all of them with different relationships to this tournament, different kinds of power, different institutional languages, all of them arriving at the same basic assessment. What happened was not right. The one voice conspicuously absent from that assessment was the voice of the governing body that selected him. Artan said he would be at the next World Cup, God willing. David Eby said let's have him referee in Vancouver. Olivia Chow said she would write to FIFA. Marit Stiles said he earned his place on the world stage. UEFA said football is made to connect people. And thousands of people in Mogadishu said, without words, just by being there, that what he built and what was taken from him were both real, that they saw it, and that they would remember. The questions this episode raises will not be answered by a single tournament, but they have been asked now, loudly in front of the largest sporting audience on earth. And football, as anyone who has followed it long enough knows, has never been particularly good at staying quiet.